This movie exists. This movie wasn't cancelled. This movie caused the creation of the Tomorrowverse. This movie introduces this universe's version of Wally West, but he never appeared in any prior film and does literally nothing in this film besides die. It comes off like the writers actively hated his character. In fact, most of the characters in this movie are only featured because the animators deadass thought that including a character just for them to be killed off was better than not featuring them in this god-awful movie at all. That shows you what DC actually thinks of their fan base. Superman's plan to attack Apocalypse is the most retarded thing he's ever done, even by Clark Kent standards. It reeks more of the writers merely wanting an excuse for the invasion to happen more than them actually sitting down and planning it out properly. There is no reason for Mera, Aquaman and Martian Manhunter, all of whom are either vulnerable to fire or more useful in water, to go to industrial planet like Apocalypse where there is little to no water at all yet lots of fire. It would make more narrative sense for them to stay behind and assist the Teen Titans, who in the final product have no actual Justice League protection beyond this intro sequence. Also, there was no need for the Darkseid war arc to be adapted in the series that was by this point trying to distance itself from the New 52, but I suppose the fanbase just refused to let them drop the relation. Also, in spite of Darkseid having previously created a being made of partial Kryptonian DNA, there is not a single thought until far later in the movie to use weapons made from or using kryptonite. Though I will get to that later. The Paradooms. Literally the worst concept DC has ever had. First off, these things are very inconsistent with their strength throughout the film. Other times they are easily killed, while in other times they effortlessly kill some of the most powerful characters. Also, the fact they are made from Doomsday's DNA and thus are partially Kryptonian is not relevant to the movie at all except in the last act. Despite magic being a very strongly established weakness of the Kryptonians for many decades, Mera, Shazam, Zatanna and John Constantine are depicted as virtually useless against the things along with other magic users. Again, it is very clear that the writers and animators of this movie were incompetent buffoons who did not actually care about or otherwise actively hated the characters they were tasked with featuring in a film. Why is this movie respected by the fanbase so much if they can't be bothered to respect the characters who aren't the ones on the DVD cover art? What is the current DC writers and animators' obsession with having cyborgs' arms or other limbs ripped off? Why do they have to do the black man in like that? How did Darkseid get the Mobius chair? There was no establishment of New Genesis in this movie series prior, nor even in this film. The Mobius chair literally just appears in this film and in Darkseid's possession with no explanation given at any point. Raven being driven to is emotional and all, but there are still surviving Titans who were not shown dying at this point, like Superboy and Wonder Girl, who are not mentioned by name in this film at all. Instead, this comes off like she's trying to kill herself literally just because Damian left her, which only further goes to show the blatant favoritism this film's writers and animators had for the characters on the cover and the equally blatant hatred they have for all of the others. Also, yes, for that matter, Wonder Girl just vanishes from the movie. There is no body nor death scene. She just stops appearing. I bet if she was the new one, she would have been one of the beloved cover art characters, because modern DC writers and animators only respect characters who are biologically linked to the League members as direct children or grandchildren, given this film's own treatment of Damian in comparison to its treatment of Dick, and I say that as someone who does actually like Damian Wayne as a character. Also, Lois Lane is just an idiotic leader of an army as her husband Clark, or at least the writers definitely portray her as such, whether intentionally or not. First of all, 2 entire years have gone by and she didn't make any serious attempt to dethrone Darkseid until literally just now. Second of all, Superboy has the full set of Kryptonian powers that Superman currently lacks, and yet she doesn't include him in her final push onto the planet of Apokolips itself, and instead just effectively sacrifices him to the Paradooms as though she views him as garbage or as inferior to Clark. We'll get to that later. And also, again, 2 entire years and there was no serious moves against Darkseid or his Reapers until there was only weeks left to save the planet. She also didn't try to recreate Damian or Constantine until literally this very moment. The 2 years later time skip is literally one of the most pointless things in this entire film. It makes both the characters and the writers controlling them come off like complete and utter idiots, even more so than they did already. If Darkseid has been on a universe-conquering spree lately and is only just now getting to what the fuck happened to New Genesis? Why are they not mentioned in this film at all? Did Darkseid kill them all off-screen before the movie? If so, that would fully cement this film as not actually being what if the heroes didn't have plot armor, but instead what if all of the plot armor was simply given to the villain instead? Of course, it already basically is that film. Forced Damian and Raven romance. The King Shark and John Constantine scene is one of the most overrated scenes in all of media. The screenwriter does not deserve as much praise for it as she got, and in fact she'd honestly be ashamed she even worked on this movie to begin with, as should all members of the cast crew. This scene is literally just a single throwaway line and sight gag that could easily be missed if you're not paying attention, and has no bearing on the plot or succeeding character interactions. It is not LGBT representation. It is literally just dangling a key in front of the audience like they are a bunch of infants, and unfortunately most of the DC fanbase reacted as an infant would. But not me. It would have been really nice if Superboy had been prominent in this film beyond the animators just hating him and wanting to kill him. He would have been a very entertaining foil to Damian during these events. It just shows that DC writers cannot actually ever think to give the fans something new, which is what a Connor and Damian friendship would have been. Of course, it would have been even better if he had been in the Young Justice animated series and interacted with its version of Beast Boy, but that is now fully cemented as never going to happen, and nobody but myself would even want it to. Lois sacrificing countless people to the paradooms as if she doesn't give a single shit about their lives at all. The writers literally made her out to be a completely callous bitch in this film. Cheetah and Lady Shiva getting 360 no-scoped by random LexCorp mooks that were completely nameless and entirely human characters, and not even highly trained assassins or anything. Literally just perfectly normal and typical human mooks with typical, unmodified guns. People actually praise this as a sign of the characters not having plot armor in this movie, and if you think that, then you are a sadistic toddler who doesn't know what plot armor even is. Also again, Superboy would have added heavily to this scene, seeing as how it would have offered him and Lex Luthor one final scene of interaction. But it's evident that again, the writers and animators actively hate him. Batgirl getting killed unceremoniously. Orchid being killed easily despite being magic. This scene. The fact this version of Superboy will never return in any further films or animated series no matter what, and will never be seen again, was not featured in the Young Justice animated series, nor allowed to meet or interact with that series version of Beast Boy, all given additional 1 million sins. This is the only part of the movie where kryptonite is ever used against the paradooms. And for the most part it is completely wasted. Also it's at this point I will sin Darkseid being the main antagonist, because at this point I have officially become fed up with his ridiculous amount of villain plot armor and longer respect or enjoy him as a character. Nor am I excited for any future projects where he is likely to feature as an antagonist. This scene fully made below the Darkseid character. This film mentioned the female Furies in the opening sequence, but instead of them appearing we get cybernetic versions of previously dead characters instead. For no reason. There was literally no reason to mention the female Furies earlier if this was what you were going to do anyway. I understand it happened in the Darkseid War storyline, but that storyline was horrible and did not need to be adapted at all when this movie series was trying to divorce itself from just being the New 52, but it was the fanbase who refused to allow them to do that, and so now nothing from these films will ever be seen again. Also the decision to follow through on cybernetic Wonder Woman retroactively ruins the previous film, Wonder Woman Bloodlines. More torture of Cyborg for no good reason. I'm going to prove Needle the Mouse Productions wrong here. I am going to say that the fight between Bruce and Damian in this film actually is a horrible and forced scene. Considering A, that we've had this moment before in Batman vs Robin as well as to an extent in Batman, Bad Blood, where Talia was quite evil to Damian as well as Bruce. This fight between them feels like little more than the writers to please fans who already hated their prior work anyway rather than the ones who actually did. But of course, if you actually liked the prior films you would have long given up on this film by this point. Also another missed opportunity. Why not have this scene be Thomas versus Bruce instead of Damian versus Bruce? I don't know how that could have happened, but Bruce's father would have had much more an effect on him than Damian. Having Thomas Wayne look at Bruce under Darkseid's control and express shame in him for letting a villain take control of him, for taking part in what has happened to the world, and all of the other things Batman did under Darkseid's control would have been a far more powerful scene and tied the movie to the prior Flashpoint film far better than repeating a plot thread from two prior movies that had already been resolved. Just imagine Batman's reaction to his own father being ashamed of him, or better yet imagine how Damian would think of his other grandfather as Batman. I'll let you be the judge of if DC should have hired me or not. I didn't say this before, but neck snaps are literally the most laziest and insulting method of killing off any character ever. I'm adding a sin just because they just felt the need to add yet another one into this film. Trigon Superman is another overrated aspect of this film. Lowest eyes, but honestly I feel like she deserved it after how glaringly incompetent she was as a resistance leader and how she callously threw away most of the other heroes' lives without a second thought. Superman freed by the power of love. Sinning Superman beating the shit out of Darkseid because Superman doesn't actually get to eviscerate Darkseid to death in this battle. Trigon vs Darkseid fight gets sinned because it's not worth sitting through this incredibly shitty ass film and would have been better as a 30-minute showcase short film all on its own or as a fan-made death battle video. You barely even see the damn fight anyway, and all that you do see is them punching each other and Trigon throwing Darkseid around. There is no real use of either character's powers or strategic thinking. Honestly, a very lame-ass fight that is not at all living up to the hype. And finally we get to the Sonic 06 ending where the timeline is erased and reset. All of these versions of these characters are doomed to never appear again, no matter if they are better than any other version or not, and where all of the prior movies are rendered completely pointless to ever watch or revisit again because none of them matter anymore, seeing as how they no longer canonically happened. No matter how poetic you try to make this be, this ending will never make me not think of Sonic 06, and that is not something you should strive to have your work be compared to. Also, Damian and Raven are a bullshit forced couple, and I'm adding an extra sin because Constantine House of Mystery also sucked, did not undo any of this film's events, and made me thoroughly despise the character of Spectre and his bullshit rules. If you sat through this video all the way to this point, thank you very much. Please do not forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment so it gets noticed more by the Dark Lord of all YouTube, that is the algorithm. Links to my Patreon and Ko-fi will also be in the description if you want to financially support me for further work and receive benefits for doing so. I now return to ignoring every single thing DC puts out unless they give in to my demands.